Hello class, I'd like to give you a new topic for this week. It's going to be CSS navigation bars. And this is going to be the type of navigation and code that you would get from an outside website or a tutorial and adapt to your own website. So it's not built into Dreamweaver. If I switch back to Dreamweaver here, we looked at the Spry tools, just introduction to the Spry tools and especially the Spry menu bar. So there are built-in functions in Dreamweaver. This is the drop-down menu bar. But what I wanted to mention in this tutorial is that a lot of what you'll do in Dreamweaver, it won't be something that Dreamweaver writes for you. Once you get into a little more advanced websites, you may bring in code yourself, that you have from another site or that you find from a tutorial that you want to include in your site. So you're not always going to be using the pre-written functions in Dreamweaver. So let's look at this website. I'll show you what I'm going to do. I mentioned before that I wanted to continue building on this site each week for the next couple weeks and incorporate some new things. So if you check this one out, it's got a nice little CSS menu. It looks like an image bar, but it's all done in CSS and it's very simple. So I'll show you how to incorporate that. And then I've got a lot of websites here listed if you want to learn a little bit more about this. Lots of tutorials that you can check out. So I'll go back to Dreamweaver, and or before I do that, let me just make a note here. This is the website. The link is provided for you, so you can get the code yourself, and then you can start to adapt the code to your website. So that's how I'm going to do this tutorial, as opposed to trying to type everything out from scratch. So the site looks pretty much the same. One thing that I did change was the rounded corners on the top. I'll talk about rounded corners on this menu in just a minute. It can be a little bit tricky if you're going to incorporate rounded corners in a menu, but I'll show you how to do that. Let's go to the code, the HTML code first. Now, one thing that's different you'll see if you compare it to last week's project that didn't have a menu, it has a table in the menu division tag. So if you recall, we had the container, the header division tag, and then the menu. So this is new. Now sometimes a table works really well, sometimes you may not need it. In this case it works well because it allows me to create evenly spaced buttons, navigation buttons in my bar. So I've got a table width of 1000 that matches the container width. Height of 40 also matches the height of the menu division tag. Border of 0, cell padding and cell spacing 0. Then I've got a TR, which is basically one row, and then 7 TDs. So that's 7 links, including the home link. Each of those is 142. That adds up to almost 1,000. It's close enough that you can't really see it. It has an align center, which should put the text in the middle of each cell. And then it has a V-align, which is vertical align middle, puts the text in the middle. And then you got your links on there. So that's all that's different about the HTML code, is a table inside of my division tag ID of menu. Let's go to the styles.css. Okay, I'll scroll down a little bit here. You'll see two things at the bottom. These are the only things you have to add in to make this function correctly. You see a menu A and a menu A visited, and then you see the menu hover, active, and focus. Now, what this means basically is if you want to apply certain CSS rules or properties to an area of your page that's going to have links on it, you're going to need to ID that area of your page. That's why you see the word menu in front of each of these different items. If you recall in one of the last tutorials, when I added in these CSS link properties, it just said a link visited, hover, and active. That would affect every single link on your page no matter where it's located. In this case, we're applying certain styles to a navigational bar, but we don't want those styles to affect other links in the site or on the page itself. We just want to affect the menu bar. That's why you see the menu, the word menu in front of it. That pertains to the division tag ID. That means anything falling inside of that ID gets these styles applied to it. Any link gets these styles applied to it. So the first one you see is A, and again that is just what the link first looks like when you come to the page. And then you'll see visited, and that is what the visited link looks like. I like to set that to the same because I don't like to see the visited link. I think it's a little busy and it's really not necessary. So I usually make the main A tag and the visited link the same. and then you'll see the properties here. Nothing out of the ordinary. I did put some padding on there to help with alignment. Here's the color. If you want to change the color, I don't know how I came up with that background somewhere. Picked it from somewhere. And then there's a font weight bold and a text decoration none. That takes off the underline. So that affects what you first see, what the menu looks like. Okay, the second one is important. It has the hover. Hover is probably the most important. That's the rollover. Okay, so these properties basically control the background and the font color, the font properties like bold, and then padding again, and no underline. And this pertains to the active, and then you'll see focus occasionally. Active is when you're actually clicking down on the mouse, and that one is not that important either. I like to set, if I'm thinking about a simple navigational menu, I like to set all three of these the same. Focus is something that I don't think we've looked at before, but you'll see it fairly often now. It's kind of like if you tab with your keyboard, if you're trying to access a link with your keyboard, then it would highlight in a certain way to do that. So it's accessibility if you wanted to change that, so you could do a separate one. But I just put all the three of these together. So I've got basically just the menu and the visited in one separate rule, and then I've got the hover, active, and focus in the second one. And when you go back and check it out one more time, I'll switch back here. That shows me the rollover actually changes the background color a little bit, and then changes the text color. And then I've got rollover for the same. Then you won't see anything when you click on these. Okay, and let me add two more things to this tutorial. Let me talk about incorporating one of these menus from a tutorial site like this one, or this one's kind of interesting. And then I'll talk about rounded corners applying to these different little tabs. So if you did want to apply something like this to your page, what you want to do is basically go into the source. Now, a lot of these have tutorials. You know, if you go into this article, it'll tell you step by step how to apply it. Okay, but it's also pretty easy to go into the view page source, and then sometimes it'll tell you exactly what to put into yours. Sometimes you have to figure it out yourself. But right here at the top of this one, and one thing you'll notice here is that the CSS code is actually in the HTML instead of in a separate attached style sheet. So you'd want to take this code, put it in your CSS. Now they've called theirs nav instead of menu. They've also, instead of a table, they've used an unordered list in this one, it looks like. So you'd have to copy paste this. You can change around the different elements to see what's going on. And then down in the code, here's the other thing you need to paste in there, the navigation. And you'll notice on the navigation that it has an ID of nav, and that's how this one works. So a lot of times you're going to be pasting two different elements. You're going to be pasting a chunk of CSS code into your style that you will edit and change around to match your site, and then you'll be pasting something from the HTML that includes your links and something that has an ID on it that matches up with the CSS code. So that's incorporating those. Now the sites that I have for you, like this little menu right here, that's the one I was showing you. It's pretty simple, but it's also effective. This one is a little bit fancier. This one is a little fancier. It has some shading in it, so you could check out that property. Kind of interesting. And then there's tutorial with 40 excellent CSS3 menu tutorials, so a lot of them there. And then also here's another one. This one's a little older, but it's still, anything in the last couple years should be effective here. So this one is actually pretty new on this other site. Okay, last thing on this tutorial, let's add in the rounded corner properties so you can see what happens on this. Let's actually go back to this old one. If you remember from last week, this is what we worked on here. We took, let's see, let me move that up here so you can see it. We developed the site. Now this got changed around a little bit because I had worked on it some and didn't resave it or resave the CSS. But this is the design we worked on. Had the rounded corners at the top and bottom, and then had the Sprite menu with the drop-down items. So obviously this rounded corner right here could present a little problem for your CSS menu if you're not careful. So if you wanted to try to add in the corners, that gets a little bit tricky, but I'll show you what that looks like. Let me go back to this is the one from last week with the rounded corners, and I'll go into the styles, and I'll check out the menu, and I'll just take this right here, the border. So that's the top left and top right border. Okay, and then I'll go back here to my other index that has the my custom design little CSS menu. Go into the styles.css and go ahead and add in the rounded corners for that one. Okay, and I'll do a file save and a file preview in browser. And you can see what happens. Now, one thing you could do, a couple ways you could get around that. The easiest thing you could do obviously would be to decrease the size of the table by, I don't know, 30 or 40 and match the color of the background. So the background in the menu division tag would match the color of the links of the background. That's by far the easiest way to fix that. Now, if you did want to get in and experiment a little bit with these tabs, these file tabs, navigation, then you could do that. It can create some interesting effects. I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so if I scroll down here, I want to go ahead and try out the rounded corners on the actual A link tags that pertain to the menu. So I'll go ahead and drop them down at the bottom. I'll just do the first one so we can see it. Okay, and I'll paste that right on there. Go back to design, and I'll change the menu background to white. And now you should be able to see what I'm doing here. Okay, so what that has done actually is changed the corners, the left and right corners. If you only wanted the top left-hand corner for this first link to be changed, and only the top right-hand corner for this one. But anyway, if you did want to get this kind of that kind of look just with the right corner, you'd have to go back into your code, into the CSS code, and you'd have to do a whole separate CSS rule just for that top left link. So how do you do that? Well, you'd have to go back to your HTML code and put another ID on that first link. So you'd have to do another division tag just on this home, just on this index.html link, and then an ID of like home, and then you'd go into your CSS styles, do another style here that would be hashtag home, and then you'd be able to affect only that home link. So that's where it gets a little more complicated. So hopefully, I hope that makes sense. If that does not make sense, drop me an email. This stuff does get hard for me to explain sometimes, but I hope that does make sense. Now, what I could do here is if you take a look at this one more time. Okay, if I look at that, I could take off the background or match up the background color for the menu and take off the border and get kind of an interesting look to that. Let me show you what that would look like if I go back to my CSS styles page. Okay, so if I'm looking at the menu, just a regular menu on here, let's see, there's a background color, so I could match that up. I could take the border off. I'll use my CSS styles panel for that, so let me double click. Okay, background would be this color right here, so I'll match that up. Border, let's just take off the top border here, so we'll change that to none. Might work better to take them all off, but we'll try that first. And then let's just do a file save all and a file preview in browser. And you can see you get that nice file tab look for the navigation. So you can play around with the borders here and also the colors. I think that blue needs to, the main blue for the links probably needs to stand out a little bit more, or the background needs to be a little bit lighter, but you get the idea. Maybe that light blue color would look better for the main links, and then the dark blue for the rollovers. So this will give you a number of different options, as well as the tutorial links that I posted for you. And this website with the with the file tab navigation is also posted if you wanted to grab that code to make sure you see how it's done. So that's it for this tutorial on creating your own CSS navigation.